When Emma got the message from Daniel saying, "Dinner tonight," she didn't expect much. They had met through mutual friends at a small community event in Toronto a week ago. Daniel wasn't flashy or particularly talkative, but there was something genuine in the way he listened. Still, when he asked her out, she assumed they'd go somewhere casual, maybe a nice cafe or a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. But when he pulled up in his old, dented Honda and drove her to a tiny diner on the corner of a quiet street, she felt a little underwhelmed. The neon sign flickered, Mel's Diner, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 80s. The booths were worn, and the air smelled faintly of bacon grease and coffee. For a moment, Emma thought he was joking. This was their first date, after all. Her friends had teased her about dating someone who didn't even have social media, someone who didn't seem to care about appearances. And now, here she was, sitting across from him in a diner where even the ketchup bottles looked tired. But then Daniel smiled, that quiet, honest smile that had first caught her attention. "I used to come here with my mom every Sunday," he said softly, glancing around the room. "She'd order the same thing every time, pancakes with strawberries." She said this place made her feel like home. Something about the way he said it made Emma's judgment fade a little. She leaned forward, her curiosity growing. "Is she still around?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then shook his head. "She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. But before she died, she made me promise I'd never forget where I came from. So, when I take someone special out, I bring them here." Emma's heart softened. Suddenly, the peeling wallpaper didn't matter. The cracked leather seats didn't either. She saw this place through his eyes, through the lens of memories, love, and loss. As they talked, time melted away. Daniel shared stories about his mom, how she'd worked 2 jobs, how she taught him to value people, not possessions. Emma opened up too, telling him about her parents' divorce and how she'd spent years chasing perfection, perfect grades, perfect looks, perfect life, only to realize that it never made her happy. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, kept smiling at them every time she passed. "You two remind me of young love," she said once, topping up their coffee cups. "Real love doesn't care where you eat, sweetheart. It just wants company." Emma laughed softly, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. When their food arrived, simple burgers and fries, Daniel surprised her again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny paper flower, folded from an old receipt. "I used to make these for my mom," he said with a grin. "She said I'd win a girl's heart someday with one of these." Emma took it carefully, her fingers brushing his. It was imperfect, lopsided even, but it felt more meaningful than any expensive bouquet. She felt her eyes sting, a lump forming in her throat. When they finished dinner, Daniel insisted on walking her home. The night air was crisp, and the city lights reflected off puddles on the pavement. He didn't try to hold her hand or make any bold moves. He just walked beside her, quietly matching her pace. When they reached her apartment, he smiled again. "I had a good time," he said simply. "You remind me of something real." That night, as Emma lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about him. About that old diner. About how she'd felt something she hadn't felt in years, safe. Seen. Connected. A week later, she brought him back a small surprise. "I have a place I want to take you," she said. He smiled, a little curious, and followed her. She led him to a small community center, where she volunteered. It turned out they were hosting a fundraiser dinner that night, for families struggling with cancer treatments. Daniel froze for a second when he saw the sign. His eyes grew wet. "I thought maybe we could help out," Emma said softly. "In your mom's memory." Daniel couldn't speak for a moment. He just nodded, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for hers. They spent the evening serving food, washing dishes, laughing with strangers. It wasn't fancy, but it was beautiful. And as the night came to a close, one of the organizers took a photo of them, Daniel in his old jacket, Emma with a streak of flour on her cheek. When the picture went up on the community center's Facebook page, people started sharing it, touched by the story of a man who brought his date to a cheap diner and ended up inspiring an act of kindness that fed dozens of people. Within days, local media picked it up. "The diner date that inspired a movement," the headline read. People began donating, volunteering, and reaching out. What started as a simple first date turned into something far more meaningful, a reminder that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive dinners. It's about compassion, understanding, and seeing the beauty in simplicity. Months later, that same diner became their spot. Every Sunday morning, they'd sit in the same booth, order pancakes with strawberries, and talk about their week. The waitress always greeted them with a smile, saying, "See, I told you, real love doesn't care where you eat." And as Daniel looked at Emma across the table, he knew she wasn't just another date, she was the reason he finally understood what his mom meant all along. That love, at its best, doesn't need luxury. It just needs heart. By the end of that year, Daniel and Emma had started a small foundation together to support local families battling cancer. They named it Mel's Promise, after the little diner where it all began, a place that taught them both that sometimes, the smallest gestures can change everything. And every time someone asked about their first date, Emma would just smile and say, "He took me to a cheap diner, and it turned out to be the best night of my life."